Okay, so today we're going to talk about poetry, and we're going to talk about specific techniques to poetry or for poetry. And so the first one we're going to talk about is the anaphora. The anaphora, it's right down here. So everybody pick your color. So we do our key. Before we even talk about the poem, I want us to do this. So you're going to make your key like we...
multiple colors.
Yes, like we do. Okay, and so I'm going to put my anaphora up here, which we know I just did in blue. Okay, what is an anaphora? Well, I'm glad you asked. An anaphora is merely repetition of a word or words at the beginning of each line. So you must have at least 2 lines in order for it to be called an anaphora. Okay, and we're going to talk about the reason for that in a moment. So looking at the poem real quick, let's just go ahead and identify the anaphoras. The first one, what do we see? Anybody see it? It's a repetition of a word or words at the beginning of each line. Yes, okay. So we have this her, and we have this her, okay? Do you see any more anaphoras?
So.
Perfect. Okay, so we've identified those right now. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the caesura. C-A-U, oh, I can't even spell this today. C-A-E, sorry. S-U-R-A, caesura. And I'm going to use my caesura for green. All right, and I'm not going to give you a definition, I'm just going to demonstrate it so you can see it as I go. A caesura is a poetic term, technique for poetry. Okay, what did I just highlight?
All the punctuation.
All the punctuation. Okay, so caesura is just a nice fancy word for punctuation. Obviously, we don't use caesura as the name in a novel writing or nonfiction, do we? We just call it punctuation. But poetry is caesura, and there's a reason why. Caesura has to do with the natural pause in speech and what am I trying to say? Helps, I guess, with pacing. When you use punctuation, do you speed up or do you slow down when you read? You slow down, don't you? Because you have to take a breath in order to, with the punctuation, right? Okay, so we have all of that here. The next one I want to show you is called enjambment. 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 E-N-J-A-M-B-M-E-N-T. Enjambment. That is the absence of caesura. Or punctuation, okay? Now, looking at this, do you see any punctuation? I mean, any non-punctuation, sorry. No, you do not, do you? Okay, So, if we looked at, let me turn it over. Nature's first flower blooms vividly and my heart bursts with joy. Okay, what do we have here? Where's our caesura first?
At the end.
At the end, right here. That's our caesura, and so we would annotate this like this. Okay, that's our caesura. Where is our enjambment? And I'll use yellow for enjambment. What is enjambment? What is the definition of enjambment? Yes, the absence of punctuation or caesura. So where is that? Where would that fall?
And nature, the first three.
Yeah, it'd be right here, right? There's nothing here, is there? That's enjambment. There's nothing there. Okay? Now, let me clarify this too. If you put nature's first flower blooms vividly and comma and my heart bursts with joy all on the same line, then that works for an enjambment. So it has to follow, okay, the sentence makes sense. Okay, so if you said nature's first flower, period, we have to stop and we focus on what? Flower and what that means. The next line could say, blooms vividly, period. What blooms vividly? The flower, do you see? Forget the heart, or forget the and just put, my heart bursts, period. Then I would focus on the word burst, you see? And then you could put down the next one with joy, period. Okay? And the reason for the caesura and the enjambment for a poet is because normally you don't write epic poems, okay? Unless, you know, you're Beowulf or something back in the day, or Chaucer or whatever. So you have to pack in a whole lot of meaning through your diction, word choice. Every word needs to be really carefully thought of to convey the most impact. The punctuation and the lack thereof, caesura and enjambment, also does the same thing. Where am I going to get the most bang for my buck, so to speak, okay? And so when you think about line breaks as well in poetry, your line break, you want to think what word is going to end also, each line, okay? A line. Several lines make up a stanza, right? You knew that. And a 4-line stanza is called a quatrain. All right, so, excuse me. So that's what we have to think about. You do not want to have a poem that ends with of, a, the. I mean, you can, but because what does that do? It's just filler word, isn't it? It's our transition. We want to focus on words that we can dissect and think about and ruminate over, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so now let's look at this poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Looking at the title, Nothing Gold Can Stay, what do you think the significance of the title means?
Plant stuff.
Okay. What is the significance of this word?
Plants are cool.
Okay.
They all laugh.
Look at the title first. What is it? Gold. Nothing gold.
Nothing good can stay.
perfect. Nothing good can stay. Okay? Nothing. Is nothing a positive or a negative connotation? Right? So it's negative right off the bat. This poet, Robert Frost, who wrote in the early 20th century, believes that nothing gold, nothing good can stay. And how does he show us that? Well, he uses nature as the metaphor for that. And so let's look at this. Nature's first green is gold. And what does that mean? Oh, we have to have our diction.
Something good's gonna be there.
Okay?
Like, it's gonna be there.
It's going to be there.
It's gonna be cool and you're gonna love it.
Yes.
And it's just gonna be good.
Okay, so the first green is gold. And it's good. Okay, it's good. There's my diction with pink. Okay? And the first green is gold is what season?
Spring.
Spring. Okay. And so when we think about the seasons of time, we have fall, winter, and then spring follows winter. Summer, and the cycle begins again. So every year we can look forward to the spring and the flowers blooming and all the new beginnings, the warm weather and all of that, right? His second line says, her hardest hue to hold, her early leaves of flower.
Mother Nature.
Mother Nature. He personified nature, Mother Nature. Why does he do that? Well, I don't know yet. Let's talk about that. I'm not sure. But that's our anaphora. He says here, the hardest hue to hold. You cannot hang on to what?
Nature.
Yeah, you can't hang on to spring, can you? You can't hold on to it because it will move forward. And then he says, her early leaves of flower. Okay? What does flower represent? Well,
Pretty thing.
yeah, beauty.
We're going to eat.
Where in beauty, it represents beauty. Okay, but only, transition, but only for how long? How long?
An hour.
An hour. Okay,
That's
well,
short,
yeah, we all know that spring lasts longer than an hour, don't we?
but it feels like that.
But it feels like this to him because we are seeing how he is feeling depressed a little bit. Do you get that yet?
He's getting down in the dumps.
He's down in the dumps, yes. And so nature, the spring, only lasts an hour in his mind right now. Then, after the flower dies, essentially, right? Then what happens? Leaf subsides to leaf. And what happens when a leaf falls off the tree or the plant?
It gets eaten or squished or dies. Or
It dies.
something bad happens.
Okay? So we have this idea right here that nothing good lasts. Do you see how he's creating that? And the fact that he's only seeing the beauty for a very short period of time, and he's focusing on the loss
Absolutely.
more than the beauty. That's a mindset, isn't it? People do it all the time. The next stanzas say, so Eden sank to grief.
That's the guy's name.
Now, I'll tell you in a second. So dawn goes down today. So the words sank to grief and down are negative. When he uses the repetition of so and so, it's a sense of finality. There's nothing I can do. And Eden, E-D-E-N, is an illusion. It's a technique, an illusion. A-L-L-U-S-I-O-N.
I thought illusion had a response to I.
That's illusion. I see an illusion of a shadow. This is illusion. And it an allusion makes reference to something that went before. It can be a biblical allusion, it can be a historical allusion, it can be an art allusion. It can be an allusion to even, I'm trying to think, the Great Flood in Galveston. So you're alluding to something without telling all about it. So for this instance, Eden. Eden represents, now remember, he wrote in the early 20th century, and he's an American poet. So Eden represents the Garden of Eden in the Bible. And that story says that Adam and Eve, the first man and woman, were created in the Garden of Eden. And they ate the forbidden fruit, and therefore they were banished from paradise, of a perfect place. So when he uses so Eden is suffering because the beauty is now gone, sank to grief. And the dawn, instead of rising into hope in a new day, also essentially goes or sinks down today. Dawn doesn't sink down today, does it? Dawn goes down to night, and the cycle begins. So right off the bat, dawn shows us that it's not dawn in his mind. Are y'all following? It's not dawn in his mind, because that dawn is down. And that mirrors his emotional state. And then he ends it with, nothing gold can stay. Nothing. And so he is now mired in his negativity. And so the theme of this could possibly be what?
That you need to focus on the beauty more than like how long it's gonna last.
Okay, focus on the beauty instead.
Nothing stays. Nothing's permanent.
Nothing's permanent. And so essentially the whole central idea of this is about loss, isn't it? Loss of some kind. It can be a loss of a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Okay? He is writing this as a man, and he is using her for Mother Nature. So we can maybe infer that nature is really his wife or something, and that he's lost this relationship, and he never was able to hold her, perhaps, because he's personified this, a female character, and he's maybe been hurt so badly that he can't recover, and so he feels like, I'm never going to find love again. And that's what we see here, don't we? He's never going to find happiness again, because he's only focused on the loss and the death of the flowers and the leaves, which represent the death of a relationship or a dream even. That just doesn't have to be a relationship, but it can be a loss or a death of a dream. Can't it? Yeah. And so, depending on how you wanted to write a paper about what he means, is basically what you think. Like you said, to focus, the theme could be to focus on the positive and forget the loss, and choose to remember the good. Someone else could talk about that Frost is saying that loss of any kind will never go away, and that he will never see beauty again, perhaps. Do you see that? And how he uses the techniques here helps us to understand his feelings of hopelessness and despair. And he has remained stuck in his pain, right? Because grief is pain. And normally when you lose something, a dream or someone in your life, you will experience grief. But the normal response is, after time, one begins to come out of grief. That doesn't mean you forget them, but you don't have that pain of longing, abandonment, or whatever else, and then you begin to see beauty in nature and in the other relationships you have that are good, and also recreating perhaps another dream. So it's a sense of hope then. He doesn't have any hope here, and I don't think at this point in his life he's going to have any. And we can learn from this that this isn't where we need to stay. Yes, we all go through periods of sadness and grief, but we can't stay there. We can't stay there, and we can't have the fatalist attitude that nothing good can stay, because we can have good memories even with loss, can't we? And we can make a better today even through the pain of loss in some way. So we've gone over how to annotate a poem. We've looked at the anaphora, which is the repetition of a word or words at the beginning of each line. We've looked at the caesura, which is the natural pause in speech and helps with the pacing. We've looked at the enjambment, which is the absence of caesura. We've looked at what an allusion is. This is a biblical allusion to the Garden of Eden. We've looked at theme, and we've looked at how diction illuminates the theme of loss that we've come up with. See how important that is? So you have to, as a poet, really think about the words that you're putting on paper to convey the theme and idea that you want to convey, and so that the reader can get the meaning and apply it to their own lives. Okay? Because this is so generic, we don't know exactly what loss he experienced. We can only speculate. But we can be assured that he believes nothing good is going to happen to him anymore. He's basically given up. And especially when he uses the anaphora here. So, Eden gives up. So, dawn gives up. Basically, you could reword that. Therefore, nothing good can stay. Do you see that? Okay.